Russia's invasion. Okay, that's fine. Russia's invasion of the Ukraine has, of course, put an increasing pressure on energy markets. I think that's very much the context in which Repower EU was presented. So the background of course, already high energy prices over autumn and early this year, and then of course the situation with Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. And as you know, the main purpose, and you've seen actions last night about this as well from the Commission, the main purpose of Repower EU is to break our dependence on imports, on energy imports, fossil fuel, of course, from Russia. And the aim is to go to a situation where we, by the end of this year, would have reduced our imports by two-thirds, and as soon as possible, but somewhere around 2027, to basically have reduced them to nil. And that is the underlying aim of the communication. I mean, looking at different instruments to address, on one hand, the energy prices, and on the other hand, this issue of dependence on Russian on imports from Russia, rather. You saw that the Commission is proposed yesterday a ban on imports from on Russian coal. We are looking at we are carrying out analysis now for the moment on the oil imports and to see how that depends, how that evolves. But we also, of course, have the package of proposals already on the table from the 14th of July and from December, i.e. the Fit for 55 proposals, which go very much in the same direction, and where there are strong synergies in what we're trying to achieve on Repower EU. You've probably already seen that our estimate in the impact assessment for Fit for 55 is that full implementation of these proposals would reduce gas consumption in the EU by approximately 100 BCM. Now, the imports from Russia are at approximately, when we talk about gas, are at 155 approximately, well, let's say 150 BCM. So that is that the Fit for 55 is already a first package, but we have raised also how we should deal with this package in the coming weeks. On one hand, now more specifically of what the communication says on energy prices, it's very much a follow-up on the toolbox from last autumn, but maybe a clarification of this toolbox. The Repower EU raises the issue of regulating prices. It also opens the issue of state aids, of course, and also emphasizes the possibilities of the ETS auctioning and the possibilities of using that for different purposes by member states to combat the impact of higher energy prices. There's also a discussion, as you've seen, on how to deal with windfall profits. That's the energy price side. Then there is a strong emphasis, for obvious reasons, on diversifying supplies. And here there is a strong emphasis, of course, on LNG. And you've already seen the EU-US declarations on LNG from the morning of the summit, so i.e. 10 days ago, where we talk about the possibility, we raise the possibility with the US of increased LNG imports, but it's not only about LNG, it's also about a wider decarbonization agenda together with the US. It's not only about supply. There is talk about pipeline gas from other countries than Russia, the possibilities to see whether these can be increased. From Norway, there has already been an increase over last year, and we're looking at other origins as well for this pipeline gas. And then a strong pressure that you've seen on developing biomethane and renewable hydrogen. Linked to this then is the whole Green Deal agenda, with rolling out or quicker rolling out of renewables and energy efficiency. So what we're trying to do basically is to front load a lot of the Fit for 55 packages in the years ahead. One hand, on solar, you'll be seeing coming quite soon the solar strategy, the solar rooftop initiative, and so forth. That will be coming in the coming. That will be coming in a short time, and work on permitting around renewables. That will also be part of the next steps to speed up the deployment of renewables. We've also said very openly that should there be a will from the Parliament and Council to look again at the Fit for 55 proposals, the Commission is ready to do so. Strong push also, of course, on energy savings. Then there is in REPowerEU, and especially with the focus of next winter, strong emphasis on developing our resilience towards fluctuations or volatility on the gas market. You've seen that a couple of weeks after that, actually the same week as the summit, so 2 weeks ago, we presented the legal proposal on gas storage. The obligation for, according to the Commission's proposal, the obligation for member states to move to 80% gas storage by the 10th of October, and then the possibility to go higher. Today, approximately 25 to 30% of the gas we use over winter comes from storage. Some of the storages are at decent levels, others are at very low levels, and it's interesting to see that they are at low levels, in particular, in storage capacities that are owned by third country actors. That is, of course, an issue of concern. Linked to this is solidarity mechanisms between member states. Most member states have a storage capacity, not all, however. So predefined systems as to how the storage capacity can be allocated or shared between member states, and the will to identify these storage capacities as critical infrastructure, creating also incentives for suppliers. Part of this strand of action is also something that we are working on for the moment, the work on a joint energy platform, looking at purchasing of gas, hydrogen, and so forth. Now, that's very quickly the REPowerEU initiative at a glance, and a general glance. Next step is basically that we have been tasked by the European Council to come up with the REPowerEU plan. So this is basically a list of concrete actions. One of the things we're working on for the moment is work bilaterally with the member states to identify critical, not critical infrastructure, but possible projects that will strengthen energy independence and possible reforms needed at the level of member states to go in the same direction. So by the end of May, we are asked to come up with a plan on REPowerEU, and this, of course, will be far more concrete in terms of measures and in terms of initiatives from the Commission. This is why we are working on this in a very busy format for the moment, to be able to iron out these proposals and to be able to put them forward to Council and Parliament. I should also say that it's noteworthy that the legal proposal on gas storage is being dealt with in a rather speedy manner by the Council and the Parliament. I think the aim is to reach an agreement at least by summer, which would, as you know, is a quick pace for Commission proposals, adoption in Council and the Parliament. So that is going very speedily ahead. But a lot of the further detail of what REPowerEU entails will then be in the plan that we will present by the end of May. I think I stop here.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me? It's been a while. It has been a while, and it's a pleasure to see you. I apologize to the colleagues that are on the call, but it was in a good cause. I had to make a presentation to the EPP group on CBAM. So that is a good cause. So I hope I will be forgiven for that. I would like to stop for a moment and ask if there are any particular things that the audience, maybe the panelists, but also the audience would like to raise with Pierre. I'm not sure how long you can be with us, Pierre, but I just wanted to give the opportunity with that, because there's inevitably questions to the commission. That always happens, whether you like it or not. So is there anyone please raise your hand, because I will see it right away if there are questions for Pierre Schelekens. I think there is. Oliver's, okay, I will promote Oliver to panelists, Oliver Sartor and Maria Virdis. So I will promote them. And okay, there's three questions that are being raised. So I will ask people to introduce themselves. Prefer not statements and presentations, please, but really questions to Pierre.
Mm-hmm.
Oliver?
Sure, thanks, Andre. Yeah, so so I work for Agora Energy Vendor, the European think tank based in Berlin, working on the energy transition.
Mm-hmm.
One of our main concerns is that in the rush to sort of replace Russian gas, that we lock in solutions in terms of new low carbon gas that might not be consistent with our sort of long-term goal to actually decarbonize the economy, right? So
Mm-hmm.
with hydrogen or with biogas, there are going to be limited supplies ultimately, and we'll need to prioritize those to certain industrial applications or applications that are sort of don't have other options to abate. So I'm wondering how is this sort of question factoring into the thinking, the trade-offs between sort of replacing Russian gas quickly and possible lock-in of solutions that we might not want for later on.
Thanks, Oliver.
Right.
Eberhard, your very quick introduction and then question.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. I'm in order to make it as fast as possible, I'm not even going to switch on my camera. I work for a Swiss energy company called Axpo, and I just want to point out there's some third countries in Europe which have access to storage and very much fill them. So not every third country is like another third country. The question is the following. The other big issue that we're looking into is a possible redesign of the EU energy market design. There's discussion about price caps here and there. Is there anything you can say about that process?
And the last one for Maria Virdis, who did not want to be a panelist, but I will make an exception and raise the question with you, Pierre, if I may, is energy savings. What is the space in the repower? Is there a lot of provisions on energy savings? So Pierre, go ahead, please, and then we move on.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. Thanks for the questions. I will unfortunately not be able to listen to the panels. I would have liked to, but I need to shift to another meeting. Listen, on the first question raised by Oliver, I think it's a very justified question. Let's be very honest. There's a war on our doorstep and nearly in our house, and that is a situation that we have to deal with urgently. First and foremost, in terms of support to the Ukraine, but also in terms of course, the way it has impacting the EU. So in these situations, I think it's difficult to avoid a certain level of urgent reactions to things. But you are absolutely right that we should try to avoid then creating, as you said, lock-ins or stranded assets or a strategy that goes against what we're trying to achieve on the Green Deal objectives. I think that's not the case. It's something that is with us very much when we develop these notions or these proposals. I think the Green Deal is very present in Repower EU. There are aspects, of course, that are a bit outside the Green Deal, notably what we do on gas storage and so forth, outside in the sense that it's not directly related to the Green Deal. But broadly speaking, what we're trying to achieve goes in the same direction. And I think what we will end up doing, as I said, is very much front-loading what the Green Deal is about. So in terms of renewables, in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of hydrogen, and I think all of that is getting a quick boost. Some might argue, and I think it's not completely unjustified, that in the very short term, it might also, for instance, have a pressure on using of, for instance, of other sources of energy, like for instance, coal, for instance. You could argue that. I think that if that is the case, were that to be the case, it will be a very short-term, temporary phenomena, and that would, of course, be taken care of taken care of is the wrong side, but which would have an impact, of course, on the ETS market. I think it's notable that the ETS has not in any way collapsed. The prices are slightly lower than they were in autumn, but it's still, last time I looked, and that was this morning, I think it was 78, 79. So the prices remain at a very decent level, and at a level which I think still creates a strong price incentive, towards renewables. And so all of what we are trying to achieve is really making sure that these strategies go in the same direction, and making sure that we don't replace one dependency for another dependency. That's another aspect. On Eberhard's question, you're absolutely right, of course, on the third country. I was a bit sloppy when I presented that. What I mean, of course, and I think the Repower EU says it quite clearly, is that we have noticed that gas storage owned by Gazprom inside the EU is at a much lower level of storage than the average. That is a situation. One of the initiatives that we're looking at, notably, is certification procedures for third country owners of gas storage within the EU. That's part of the gas storage proposal. So, but you're absolutely right that there are third country actors where that is not at all the case. However, I think we should be aware that we have a significant amount of gas storage controlled by Gazprom within the EU market, and that the levels of storage there are much, much lower. And I think that is an issue of concern. On Marie's questions, energy savings, that is, you will see in the Repower EU plan in May, you will see a substantial amount of measures on energy savings. You will also see complementary measures. We are looking at different ways of targeting households and private actors. Targeting, and I mean then in terms of awareness raising and so forth in terms of energy savings, but also in concrete measures. Just to mention, for instance, one little piece of the puzzle, certainly not the decisive piece of the puzzle, but an important piece of the puzzle. We launched, for instance, the EPREL site last week. EPREL being then providing then information on energy consumption of buildings. Energy consumption of appliances, where consumers can go in on this website and see very clearly. You want to buy a new fridge, you can go into that website and see what are the best fridges in terms of energy consumption. As I said, this is not the whole solution, but there are many of these small solutions that we need to provide. I see Eberhard made a comment, and I have some not being.
I would
not
like
being
to
very
go,
good at this. Yes.
I wanted to also give the panelists, if I can, Pierre, whether it is Andrea.
Well, I didn't want to.
Yeah, or it's Andrea or Eva.
I know Pierre has to leave, but just like, isn't the situation completely changed since Tuesday?
If I can, Eberhard, I'd like to allow some of the other maybe can ask some questions as well, the panelists, if you don't mind. Anybody wants to, Camille, anybody wants to raise anything with Pierre? Andrea, no? No, they look like not. So
Oh, sorry, I was looking for the unmute button.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have problems here now as well. Hang on. Yeah, okay, have that, yeah.
No, the question is, in the last few days, we have seen the introduction of some unconventional measures, or the proposal for unconventional measures, especially in the Iberian Peninsula. Have you had already the possibility to analyze them and consider the problem that they have in the day ahead, intraday, and balancing European markets?
We are
Yes.
looking. They're quite recent, so we're looking at them now. I now realize that this is linked to this. I realize I did not reply to everyone's questions about the electricity market design. So a bit linked to this, you will see that as part of the plan of the repower plan, we will address these issues. We are waiting, as you know, for the ACER report, which is due with us, or due to be presented on the, I think, 29th of April. And then the Commission will take that report and see how it takes what it says in Repower EU further in the Repower EU plan. I can't go into more detail. I have talked, indeed, Brad has a point. I've talked now at the state of what is in the Repower EU. There have been events indeed over this week which of course changed part of this or that influence this description of the situation. Yes, it's too early though, however, to give you all the details about this.
Can I take it before you go, because I sense that time is running for you. Kamil Lipinski from the Polish Environmental Institute. Economic Institute, sorry.
Okay, my question is, because we've been speaking about the war a lot, but we've experienced 2 days ago on the French market quite different constraint. The price was about 2,900 euros over for megawatt hour, and it was because of the lack of there are many causes of that. Nevertheless, it makes us ask if the price is 30 times almost fold higher than in Germany at the very same time. Isn't it worth considering the lack of interconnector capacity, rising the quotas, mandatory quotas for interconnector capacity between the energy systems?
Listen, there is when you raise interconnectors and the need to strengthen interconnectors in at least in some parts of the European market, you will always have, I think, support from the Commission on this. This is also raised as part of Repower EU. Now, of course, the Iberian Peninsula is the obvious case, but indeed, there is an issue. We saw this development that you described on the French market as well, and this is it's been a long-standing policy of the Commission to support integrating the market and ensuring that the interconnectors are there. But as you know, it's not only the Commission that holds all the decision-making power on interconnectors.
You saw the Commission was all powerful. Okay, thank you, Pierre. I appreciate very much your coming with us and taking the time. We hope that you can stay a little bit more, but I'd like to move on now to the first session on main driver of gas and electricity prices. Camille, James Watson, and then Andrea Villa from Enel. So Camille, do you want to start, please?
Sure, I would like to start with addressing briefly, because the topics are quite developed, the 3 main questions that we are asking. About to ask. Firstly, the main price drivers. Like we've said, there are we have to distinguish 3 different levels. Firstly is the supply side, demand side, and the structural aspects of markets. And from demand side, obviously the quick recovery from pandemic and volatility of the markets has been already discussed. From supply side, the influence of war and Gazprom was also discussed. Nevertheless, I would like to focus on the structural conditions that influence the high price of the market. Firstly, the lack of interconnectors seems to be an issue because the price differences between pricing areas are huge. And secondly, the importance of vertically integrated undertakings within some markets, especially Gazprom, with state-regulated monopoly provided within the gas sector, abuses its dominant positions. And one of this we've analyzed from many angles as Polish Economic Institute these abuses. And one of this kind of abuses was referred by EC before me, that is not filling up the storages of gas. Twice less gas storages, it clearly influenced the price. Within the tight market, Gazprom has the position to influence the prices. When the market is opens, its position decreases. So if we want to address those issues, we cannot. We have to not only to focus on Fit for 55, but also maybe Secure for 66, for example, like not to overlook the security of supply issue within the scope. For example, the French Senate proposed 2 years ago during the pandemic, the European sovereignty document, and it did not influence that much the policy. The increasing influence of Chinese, like we've discussed Russia, but also the increasing influence of China-related companies within the energy sector was addressed in that document, and it was not that much covered within European Union. So I think we are entering the world of increasing third countries barriers and confrontations. So to put it simple, there will be sanctions, there will be other diplomatic and measures within the energy sectors. So there will be energy laundering. Like we have money laundering, there will be energy laundering. So maybe the European Commission and member states should introduce measures to strengthen within the energy sector, strengthen the ACERs, strengthen the regulators, to provide them with the measures to monitor the market in the way the financial sectors monitor the money laundering, to avoid this kind of risks and tackle them. Coming back to Repower EU, I would like to say that it's surprisingly so. There were many important, like diversification, substitution with renewable energy sources of Russian gas. However, the recommendations of International Energy Agency were not all of them were introduced within the Repower EU, and I am speaking of rising the production from nuclear energy sources. I'm speaking of increasing the production capacity, production from coal, from oil for this year to decrease. The Polish Economic Institute, it recently published report addressed those risks, and we can go further. It's extremely urgent issue to decrease the dependence on Russian gas. We can go not only 100, we can go 130. So decrease our dependency by 90% if we use all of our resources, if we reduce the demand, if we substitute with renewable energy sources and non-renewable energy sources, and if we diversify as Commission proposes. So I think these three aspects should be introduced, should be taken in account when discussing securing the supply and decreasing the long-term energy prices within the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Camille. Let me go to James Watson next. James.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. It's a great pleasure to be here again, and thanks for the invitation. I will also be brief. Appreciated Camille's point of view, and indeed on the pricing thing, it's not surprising that I was also going to talk about supply, demand, and structural issues. I think I will slightly change, therefore, the direction, because I think everybody here is fairly knowledgeable of the situation. We understand the demand rebound. We understand the supply constraints that were experienced last year, and of course, the impact of the war. We also understand the structural issues around lack of interconnectors, but also in Europe, we would in Eurogas also add the lack of current existing LNG facilities to deal with a sufficient change from the current east-west gas system to a new west-east gas system. So there are indeed many different elements that have to be basically considered. In terms of the position of a dominant player, the European Commission is investigating Gazprom, as far as I understand it. I have full confidence in DG Competition and the national authorities to undertake such activities, and I won't really comment on that at this stage. As Eberhard has mentioned earlier, indeed already Gazprom pulled out of the Gazprom Germania holding, and that has basically essentially been nationalized as a critical infrastructure. So some elements are changing almost daily. You have to really keep the pace. What I would say, therefore, is that what we have seen in the current situation, and what we do think is important, is that essentially the acceleration of the decarbonisation of the gas sector is what is being undertaken. In December, the gas package was proposed by the European Commission with no major surgery, despite the high prices back then, with no major surgery on the gas markets. This was a vote of confidence, if you will, in the fact that the gas market was functioning. We have seen, however, of course, some terrific price spiking during the beginning of the war. And indeed, this has led to reflection. And the European Commission put on the table, as Pierre has outlined, numerous ideas about how they can control those prices. And they talk about joint procurement. They talk about mandated storage volumes. They talk about price caps even, which to me is quite incredible because I can't imagine that many in the European Commission, especially in DG Energy, doing loop-the-loops and cartwheels welcoming price capping. That doesn't seem to fit with their mentality. My view would be that even if we look at any of those, and I could go into detail on most from a Eurogas perspective, I don't think that they will necessarily be the answer that we are looking for. We are in a situation where there is a supply constraint. That instantly means that there is going to be an issue where the price is going to be higher than usual. So the only real way that you can reduce that is to increase supply. And that's a very uncomfortable message for many of the people in the European Commission, because it means that you will need to invest in more upstream activity, that you would need more supply, essentially. That's how you get price to go down. Demand and supply are clearly related to each other. When you don't have supply, price is high. When you have lots of supply, price is low. We've seen prices as low as 20 euros megawatt hour back in 2019 in the gas market, when indeed there was plenty of supply. The market was very, very liquid. So this is the reality that we're facing. We will need more supply if we really want to see those prices go back to what we would have considered normal 3 years ago. Therefore, I think that we're not really going to necessarily see that. We have to get used to a situation where prices will be higher. That means that in Eurogas, we're fully supporting retail market intervention, because retail market intervention is where people are hurt. They're the ones that are hurt by the very high electricity prices. They're the ones that are hurt by the high gas prices. So we are in support of the European Commission's approach to deal with consumers, the toolbox they brought forward, and member states will have to make sure that they take care of vulnerable consumers. Answers of messing around in the wholesale market will not necessarily be found and will not necessarily pass on either to the retail consumers in this current situation. Therefore, all of the short-term measures that we looked at, that I mentioned, joint procurement, price capping, these aren't necessarily going to create short-term solutions for the situation we are in. In fact, we probably need to really consider what we're going to do mid-term. And that's again where I will finish off, Andre, and let you take back the floor. As I said, I would be brief. The direction is very clear. And we've heard from the Cabinet Commissioner Simpson this morning as well at Eurogas, where she basically said, our view is very clear. We must decarbonize the gas sector. We will need gas in the future. We will not be able to do everything with electricity, and therefore we need to decarbonize gas. The last month, the events of the war that have shocked us all mean that we have to accelerate that. We need to bring forward new targets for volumes of renewable gas, the 35 billion cubic meters of biomethane, which you rightly said are as inexpensive or expensive in the way you want to look at it as natural gas today, and 20 million tons of green hydrogen, which is a huge amount. 300 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity to meet it, by the way. These are huge, huge figures. We fully support them in Eurogas, and that is the direction that we expect to go in. And in this time of high prices, we should be planning for that decarbonized and renewable future and making sure that we are bringing forward the investments in those gases that we will need increasingly between 30 and 50 to decarbonize the sector. Thank you, Andre.
Thanks, James. Andrea.
Oh, thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm Andrea Villa. I am the responsible of the European regulation at Enel here in Brussels. Just few remarks on the reason of this crisis. I think that it is quite obvious what we have in front of us. We have high energy prices, but the source of all these high energy prices are to be found in gas prices. And we can divide this increase in gas prices in two big phases. The first one in 2021, and the second one starting in at the beginning of 2022 with the invasion of Russia of Ukraine. And these are having a big effect on the gas market, but not only there, also in the electricity market and also on the CO2 market. If we have seen the, if we look at the behavior of CO2 prices in the last few months, we have seen that they went through the roof. They got down 30 euros, and they got back to the previous level. And this is all due to gas electricity prices, because we have different operators that they have problem with their margin calls, and so they are selling many times CO2 contracts in order to fulfill liquidity and margin calls on gas and electricity prices. So if we are not able to solve the issue of price of gas in the European Union, we are in front of a huge problem in the European energy sector. And we have seen in the last few days the proposal from the Spanish government to introduce modification that they totally goes against the rules of the internal energy market that we took 20 years to create. They are creating a two-stage process to have to have new day-ahead prices, but they are not allowing trading for increase in intraday and balancing markets, so destroying two of the important market that we have in order to balance renewable energy sources. So, and if we look at the gas prices, we think that the only way that we can do this is to stop the absence of an adequate index to the definition of import prices in Europe. If we look at TTF, that is considered the most liquid market, we see that just few volumes, just few marginal deliveries of gas define the price of all or of the majority of the import of gas in Europe. So we must do something on this issue, and in particular we should introduce a price cap that has been discussed in the last few weeks, at an adequate level, in order to avoid that just few marginal deliveries on TTF and other and on other gas hubs in Europe define prices of imports at European level. So if we are able to stop the panic, to stop this this boom in gas prices, we will be able to reduce also electricity prices and CO2 and avoid these erratic movements of CO2 prices. Until that moment, we will continue to be in this situation. And for the people that think that this is a temporary situation, this is not the case. If we look at the data on the gas market, this year was the record year of gas production in Russia and almost worldwide. But we are in front of us different periods of boom and bust. And so if we want to avoid this kind of situation that will bring a policymaker to introduce solutions that are only half cooked, we must intervene to the source of the problem that are gas prices. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. But I think there will be interesting questions. Look, I know that in Warsaw there are let's put their public displays that gas, that electricity prices are on the back of CO2. It's there. It's no, we're not making it. So I'd just like to hear from people around this room. I mean, to this table right now, and others in the audience, because we are the European Roundtable on Climate Change and Sustainable Transition. So electricity and gas and climate are very interrelated. I went into a trading company, worked for a trading company. What I asked them is, why do you want to do carbon? Because these people were trading oil and gas and coal and you know, all the energy complex, and they say, well, we think that this is going to be the arbitrage. So to what degree is carbon prices leading or being driven by something else? How do you see it? I just would be curious to see your reaction. James, is gas leading? Is carbon leading? What's leading?
Yeah, I think that, of course, we've always been supportive of the carbon markets, and the carbon market is important, but I don't think for the current prices, honestly, I wouldn't say we can say that it's a relation to the carbon market. I don't think that's the direct and correct way to go. I mean, gas prices are high, but so are coal prices. So that, of course, would also reflect. I mean, coal is also hitting record heights. So in general, I think we can still say that we support and the carbon market is functioning and price is going up. And we've seen that as a very positive thing. I think that in principle, I would stick to the explanation that I gave before. The reason that we have high gas prices is about supply and demand. There is demand and supply is not there. And therefore, it's not an issue of whether the CO2 price is high. I don't think that is really what is driving it. The CO2 price is actually a very small part of the overall price of the energy that we are buying and using and consuming. I would like to just continue, and actually, I'd like to ask a question to a fellow panelist, for Andrea from Enel, because he made an intervention where he is calling for wholesale market prices in the gas sector. And I would like to understand how they work, because this is one of the questions in Eurogas as well. We've obviously discussed, but we haven't really come to a final understanding. And so I would like to take the opportunity to ask Enel, how do they see the wholesale price cap working? Because if you set a price cap at a specific level, you will no longer be able to, if it's not high enough, you'll no longer be able to secure gas on the open market. And if you set a cap whereby you're still allowed to secure gas over that price, then is it going to be the government that pays back the difference, so sort of contract for difference? How are now looking at it? Is it sort of a cap which then limits the ability to engage in the global market, or a contract for difference? We might describe it. Maybe Andre, we go straight to Andre, he's unmuted himself.
No, I welcome this. I mean, this is the dream of any moderator, that the panelists entertain each other. I mean, I'm just here a spectator. This is great. I like that. Andrea, but if you want also if Enel, Andrea, Enel/Enel have any comments on this relationship and the role that the ETS is playing or not playing in this equation?
So on the cap, what we think that a proposal on cap should be a three-leg proposal. The first one is a cap on physical and financial transaction, future, so not previous physical and financial transaction. We should not in any way change the terms of import contract, because it could create a renegotiation problem. So it's we would like to see this cap to be applied at European level, because at national level it could not work. It can only work if we find a European solution, and with an adequate level of cap to previous price level, but not too low. Because we have to continue to import LNG. So we see that the price cap should not touch existing long-term agreements with other company, with import company. It remains open, the question of LNG, and it's a good point. And on that, we see that the possibility it's only through CFDs and some form of auctions at national and after regional auction to cover the difference between the delivery from existing long-term contract and actual demand. So it should be only an auction or cost base at the beginning. We could also do it at a cost basis way, and so to cover just the cost, let's say 2 or 3, 5% above the international prices of gas, for example, in Asia, to bring LNG in Europe, but only when it's needed, because the cap should indirectly apply also on LNG contract cover through long-term agreements, because many of them have prices that are connected to TTF. And so if you introduce a price cap on TTF, indirectly you're reducing those prices, but those LNG boats, vessels should be still sent to Europe for previous long-term agreements. And the third leg of the proposal of what we think that is necessary is to avoid that this reduced cost of gas in Europe bring an increase in gas consumption in Europe. So we must continue, at least in the short term, to continue burn coal. So we should not avoid that introducing a low value of cap. We bring online gas power plants that now are idle or able to come up only to cover peak demands, plus other energy efficiency measures like the reduction of the heating in houses and other buildings, that only that could bring a reduction of gas consumption by 10% in order to reduce the cost of the second measure, that is the CFD that we were talking about before for LNG, spot LNG vessel transaction.
Let me, before I go to the next set of issues, Camille, do you have any remark? We will continue to have all the panelists, and we're not kicking anybody out, but just to we can move on.
Sure. Firstly, I would like to address a bit of this interesting discussion that started over a chat and between the panelists about the Gazprom announcing that it is getting rid of storages. The same way as Russian tankers who started recently to switch off the AIS system did not disappear simply in the air, and they still are somewhere there. And it's the way of simply adapting to the changing legal situation. The same way after the presidential decree of the 31st March, Gazprom adapted to the changing Russian and EU legal situation and perhaps transferred some of these shares. However, we do not know so far, at least I do not know, and maybe if someone knows, he's a lucky one, the contracts and agreements between undertakings that currently control those storages that were controlled by Gazprom and what provisions are there. So let's simply do not underestimate the Gazprom position. It's still dominant within the European gas market, and it will still influence the energy prices. I clearly agree that CO2 is not the only factor nor the dominant one, as we can see, like recently, we are able to see that recently the correlation between energy prices and the EU ETS prices were not clear. Sometimes it was going like opposite directions. And we can, obviously we are facing the supply shortages, and we will be facing them. And if we want to tackle the price in long term or medium term, we have to address those issues. I see the Spanish proposal, it's really impressive because it's challenging the basis of the legal framework the EU has been establishing since the early 90s. However, I would perceive that it's extremely useful as a short-term proposal to get independent, to resolve some supply shortages and to diversify the import, the diversified import of gas, especially, and perhaps discuss further the bid gap between Spain and France. Nevertheless, it would be somehow then it won't be good for stability of the market to challenge all the framework in the long term. Thanks.
Reno, you raised your hand. I think you wanted you are up to bat in the next, but I think you had something in this particular discussion that you wanted to bring up.
Yes, indeed. I will lower my hand. No, I was just indeed. I'm speaking in the next panel, but you were asking everyone around the table, so maybe that was me as well, concerning the carbon price. So clearly, from the industry point of view, many in the industry are really convinced that it has been the increases that we have seen are really the result of speculation. So we see really the need for changes in the design and to have less access to some investment funds. We've seen very few operators having a big impact. When you were seeing the race to the 100 euros, we could see some push that were completely disconnected from the market. And for us, that's really a fundamental issue for the future, because if we cannot trust in the system, if we really don't know what to expect, if we can jump from 30 to 60 and then to 100 and today to 80 indeed, then how can we have a business model and how can we justify investments? So for us, our perception in industry remains that there was a speculation, even after the EFMA report.
Okay, thanks a lot, Renaud. And with this, I doesn't mean that I'm hoping that you're not going away anywhere, because I'd like to bring the other panelists in, but also encourage the audience to be active. I mean, look, we are making efforts to get people in person, face to face, mediocrely successful, but at least let's be active on this, not write emails to each other when we are on a Zoom call if possible. Let me start with Eva Chabizo first from Iberdrola, and then Renaud Mathieu. And Lisa Fisher from E3G unfortunately called us this morning that she woke up not well, and there was not much we can do at that point at 7 in the morning. We try, but we can't control everything. Eva, are you there? I know she was there when I see her on the list of participants, the list of panelists. Renaud, would you like to start? I'm sure we will find somehow Eva.
Sure. So I have a few slides, if you allow me.
Yes, of course. Okay, who can share all panelists? Okay, I learned that in.
I can share,
years.
apparently.
Yeah.
So I think you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So very quickly, I think I just have a few minutes. Thank you very much for this invitation in this context. So this is really, of course, we are terrified by everything that we saw, as the Commission said at the beginning, and by the crisis and Ukraine. We have many contacts with Ukraine because, as I will say later, Ukraine is also a strategic partner for raw materials. And we are also affected on the side of raw materials. I'm the Director General of Ceramic in the European ceramic industry. We just very briefly here, I want to say that we supply many value chains. Many people do not know what value chains the ceramic industry. So in addition to construction, it's also in the steel and glass and all the high temperature industries. So you would need some material for your kilns. And in steel furnaces, you find refractory ceramics everywhere, in cement as well, and in many processes. So if we are affected, many other sectors can be affected. We have a lot of SMEs. We are normally affected at 30% in terms of production costs by energy, normally, but now it's much more, of course. And we have been very resilient, but now we are testing the resiliency to the maximum. And in terms of decarbonization, and now what we are discussing today is how can we not reconcile, but how can we continue and accelerate the transition and remain competitive at the same time and move towards carbon neutrality. And there, I think the fact that we have adopted a new roadmap in November is very useful for this discussion. So we had a ceramic decarbonization roadmap in 2012, which was more based on the objective of the EU at the time to reduce CO2 emissions by 80% in 2050. In the context of the Green Deal and the Fit for 55, we adopted a new roadmap in November, which is going towards carbon neutrality, so almost carbon neutral in 2050. And really the big message of the roadmap is that what we really need is, of course, it's not the secret, it's some energy. So biogas, green hydrogen, green electricity. And our sector today is, in fact, relies at 80% on natural gas. We made that conversion in the 80s, and at the time it was a big, extremely positive revolution. We were going from coal and solid fuel to natural gas, much healthier, reducing the emissions everywhere in our clusters. So that was really a big progress at the time. So now it seems to be a handicap. And of course, we have to decarbonize our gas. We can do it with green hydrogen, or we can do it with electricity. We have many different processes in ceramics. In Belgium, there is a new facing brick plant that has just started a few months ago, that is running only on green electricity, for example. So for that product, maybe that will be the solution. For others, in ceramic tiles, it will be more biogas and hydrogen. So we have plenty of different solutions that we have factored in our roadmap. And you can see here the amount of energy that will be needed, how we are planning to reduce and to go to carbon neutrality. So now coming to the impact of the energy crisis, we can say it's destroying all our plans, all our businesses. And here we are talking a lot about the impact of the war in Ukraine, but we were already heavily impacted already in December. Any entrepreneur in our industry was sad to see the trucks leaving with the products because he was losing money on the truck. That was at the time. And any price in terms of natural gas that is already above 60, 80 euros is already a disaster or not sustainable for our industry. So now we are in the range of 200 euros per megawatt. Same for electricity. We have also been impacted by electricity. And there has been suspension of production, reduction of production, postponement of production. So really for us, we see I will come to Repower EU and we see the message. Of course, we know the solution, so we are ready to accelerate the transition. But first, we have to survive the next 3 months. And that's really the main message that we have for the national and EU authorities. And if we do not find a solution, first, we are not going to survive. So we need some very urgent aids to overcome the next 3 months. And then for the transition, we need the right framework, and we need all the energy sources to be made available. I will come to that point. Maybe before going there, I wanted to highlight that we are also impacted in terms of raw materials. So a lot of our clay was coming from Ukraine for some sectors, for porcelain, for example. And 80% of the imports from the EU for that product come from Ukraine. Coming to the energy prices, we had a statement from many different sectors back in December, so we are all affected and all very worried at the time. We supported the EC toolbox and encouraged member states to implement this toolbox. And now coming to the temporary crisis and the Repower EU. So there we were still seeing, we are receiving feedback every day from our members concerning the temporary crisis framework of the Commission. They are being adopted, so it's still too early to really make a judgment. But of course, we can have some feedback based on the choices that have been made. And one aspect that we really want to criticize is that it is really focused on electro-intensive sectors. So we know the importance of natural gas for our sector. We have seen the increase in price and the impact on the economy. And here we have a temporary crisis framework where you have 3 categories of energy-intensive industries. All our industries would fall in at least in the second one, which is where you have energy costs representing at least 3% of your turnover. So this is all our sectors. And then you have a certain amount of aid that is allowed. and percentage of eligible aid. And then there is a third category with sectors that can receive the maximum, so maximum 50 million of euros and 70% of eligible aid, of the eligible costs that can be covered by the aid. And there we have only one sector that has qualified. And we know that this Annex 1 that you can find in the temporary crisis framework, in fact, is really based on an electro-intensity criterion. So this is based on the list that was developed for the ETS stated guidelines, so the indirect compensation. And the Commission was in the process, was making proposals to extend the list to take into account the energy crisis, not the war in Ukraine. And the Commission had proposed to add some sectors so that to reflect the current electricity prices. So this is really an electro-intensity list, and this is the list that we are using to define the group of sectors that should be more compensated for the impact of the war in Ukraine. So there we see that's something that we can criticize, and also the level of eligible cost for us, as we are receiving from our members, like our companies, is too high. So this is the double of the average price in 2021. They were saying we are already heavily impacted at 60, 80 euros. So coming to a conclusion, we agree to accelerate the transition, but we need to survive, and for this we need the right schemes. If we talk about the temporary scheme there, we see really we can anticipate some problems in terms of eligible cost and scope of the sectors. And there, another issue that we want to highlight is that now we seem to have kind of abandoned the measures that maybe were in the pipeline to support these industries in the context of the energy crisis. And here I'm talking about the ETS stated guidelines. REPowerEU was mentioning that member states were being consulted on a review of the ETS stated guidelines, and now it seems to be completely postponed. So for us, that we do not understand. And this is really something additional that is jeopardizing our ability to survive in the next 3 months, and then our ability to continue the transition and to implement our roadmap. So where we will need a stable and reliable framework, but the most important will be the green energy at competitive prices. And for our industry, this is what we have in our roadmap, about 50,000 terajoule of biogas, green hydrogen, green electricity that we would need for our different sectors. Thank you.
Thank you, Renaud. Let me, Eva, I think that you restore your technical connection. I think you're there now, Eva. Ah, there you go. Okay.
There I am, sorry.
Good to see you.
So do you want me to begin?
Yes, please.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me to this very interesting panel. We have already listened to some of the questions that are the root of the problem here. And I really wanted to put on the table the big problem that we are having today with energy prices, and it is just a word: gas. It is gas. It is not electricity, okay? It is gas. And I think that once we understand this, maybe we can go to how to try and tackle the question. So, but surprisingly, what we are seeing in a lot of things, I think that the communications from the Commission are very well oriented, but the last ones have been probably putting some misconceptions on the table, because surprisingly what we can see is that we talk a lot of interventions in the electricity market, and we're not talking about the root of the problem. So I think that it is clear that there are very urgent and short-term solutions. We need to ease the situation for vulnerable consumers. We need to ease the situation for domestic and micro enterprises. I think the Commission stated very clear that Article 5 in the directive permits regulated prices. And might I mention here a very curious situation in one of the member states that is more agitating the need to change the market, the electricity market. Spain has the regulated tariff referred to the spot market. So of course it is difficult to find a solution with a situation like this. So I am going to just read what JP Morgan said on 1st April 2022 on the measures that Spain has been putting on the table, saying that the Spanish regulated clients still pay the regulated tariff, which for reasons that we do not understand, the government has decided not to change, still linked to the sport market, what brings a lot of the problems. And then, of course, we have industry. And as the present speaker was saying, of course, this is one of the biggest problems, and we don't want industry to leave Europe. What we have a very clear solution for industry, it's long-term contracts where you can really see and take advantage of the low prices that we already see in the renewables. So all these short-term measures, of course, need either a reduction of the biggest problem, the gas price, or money to be able to include in the state aid and give to vulnerable consumers. But before going to the money question, I think it is important to know where we want to get, where do we want to arrive with this crisis. We need medium and long-term measures in order to try to find out a clear solution. And the only solution the Commission has very clearly stated goes through accelerating the transition. That means more investment in renewables, more energy efficiency, and renewable gases for the hard-to-abate sectors. How do we do this? We need stable frameworks for investment in renewables. So no temporary measures that will make investors run away. And then we need also permitting. The long forgotten question of permitting. It is scandalous that we can build a solar power plant in less than a year, but we need more than 4 years to get the permitting. So unless we tackle these questions, we will find no solution. But then I go back to the question of money. We need to finance the measures. So I think that Enel made a very clear explanation of how we could be already reducing the cost of energy in Europe. It is possible. And it is, I must say that I don't share that the gas price is so high because the demand is very high. I think that we all are very much conscious that the prices of gas on the wholesale market are being approximately double the price of the cost of inputs in the border. So there is something happening. It's not only just market and supply, supply and demand playing the market. So I think that what Enel explained has a lot of sense, and that could be very helpful. And then what we see in the European Commission communications, the mention to windfall profits. I think it is important to tackle the question of the windfall profits. Where and who is getting these windfall profits? Because so far, we're talking about windfall profits in the electricity sector. I think that this assessment comes from a very important misconception. It assumes that high spot prices mean profits for generators that do not pay gas or ETS expenses because they do not emit. But this statement ignores that most of the electricity does not receive the spot price because it's being negotiated in the long-term markets. So it's been sold in advance. So I think that the European Commission did a sufficiently sensible analysis when they mentioned the windfall in the Annex 2 of the communication. But I think it is very important also to put the accent on a paragraph that has added in the communication of 23rd March, mentioning that windfall profits have to be looked maybe where players in the natural gas market are earning returns that are being very high because of these differences that I was just mentioning and of the differences with the long-term contracts that they had. So what I would try to put on the table is that we need to go to an accelerated transition if we really want to get both objectives, decarbonization and independence from the Russian gas market today, but other fossil fuel markets in the future. So let's not forget that. And in order to do that, we need to tackle the question correctly. The problem is the gas price. We need to foster clean electrification and energy efficiency. And that means we need European Union level solutions, and coordinated market interventions are going to be very, very harmful. And what we need very, very much is long-term electricity market. We need liquid forward markets. We need not long-term price signals, because this is what is permitting right now to the citizens to get the good effects of the decarbonization and the non-emitting generation. So when we see measures on the table as the ones that have been mentioned today, in which you try to compensate the cost of gas by imposing the electricity consumer that has secured low prices with long-term contracts, with additional charges, that is going to be killing precisely the markets that will bring us the solution. The renewable investors need long-term contracts to guarantee long-term revenues. This provides the basis for affordable finance. So if we adopt measures, no matter how temporary we announce that they are, that send the signal to the investor that investing in renewables is dangerous and is not the right investment, the investors will run away of Europe, and we will be killing the only way to find a solution of the problem that we are having right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eva. I think that now I see Renaud. I see either he came up visually, so my sense is that he has something to react. Andrea, also from your side, if there's anything. James, gas. So anybody wants to react to the intervention from, first of all, Eva and Renaud, but the other ones, whether they want to introduce, to react, but also the attendees. This is a hot topic, and attendees seems to be very timid. I'm not sure I understand that, but I'm hoping that they will be less timid. Did you want to react in any way to Eva's intervention, or Andrea? But if not, I don't want to force anybody.
No, quite aligned with what Eva just said. And so the problem is gas, and we have to find. So the problem is gas, and the solution are renewables. And so we have to find a way to push on these two fronts together, because if we don't solve the short-term problem, we will not be able to propose to our customer the long-term solutions that are renewables. And let's see. I think that today in Germany they will publish the first 100 pages of proposal on how to decongest deployment of renewables. We are trying something in Italy, but it is something that we cannot put together such a big investment in just a few months. We need at least 1 year to build a PV power plant, and so the two things must go hand in hand.
James?
Yes, thanks very much.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to keep you away anyway, so go ahead.
Yeah. I'm lucky. I thought I was going to have to get another meeting at 12, but it's delayed enough for me to stay to listen to Eva's intervention. I wanted to, and so I was glad I got the opportunity to hear that. Yeah, I think that of course, the focus is very much on gas, and the European Commission are very, very, very aware of that. And we are in a situation where we are seeing a war in Ukraine, and that is also leading to a tremendous amount of volatility about what the future of gas will be. Repower EU communication, as it's so called, came out on the 8th of March with a very clear direction, and that is that we are looking to diversify away from Russian gas. Nevertheless, there are strong elements where we look at LNG, there are strong elements where we look at what extra pipe could come. But the real focus, and this is what, again, I say, we've heard from Commissioner Simpson's cabinet this morning in another event that I was at, they're very, very clear that the future is not just about renewable electricity, it is also about decarbonized gases. And that is why they are focusing on things like 35 billion cubic meters of biomethane by 2030. They're focusing on 20 million tons. It's up from 5 million tons, which was the original proposal, up to 20 million tons by 2030 as well. I believe that it's very clear that the European Commission understand what they need to do to deliver net zero. And I think that we therefore have to welcome the fact that they know that they need to do that. They also know that there are things that need to be looked at. As I told you, the gas package has just come out. Their feeling is that the gas market has been functioning. They're now looking at different elements to deal with this current unexpected situation. They are making a more structural review through ACER of the electricity market. Now, there are many people who are concerned about the way that marginal pricing works and whether that works in relation to renewable electricity. In Eurogas, we have no real position on this, and we consider that the remit of Andrea and Eva and others in the electricity sector to decide what is the best market structure. But clearly there's a feeling from the European Commission that something needs to be done there too. So I think it's quite bold to say that it's all about gas. Well, Eurogas, okay, I quite like that. It's all about gas, gaseous fuels, gas. Makes me think of Jumping Jack Flash for a moment there. No, the reality is that it is about everything. It is about electricity, it is about gas, it is about the other fuels that we use, biomass, oil, coal, they're all still there today. And so in that regard, the European Commission has to be open to the solutions that they need. And they also have to look at the structural problems, not just in terms of the infrastructure, but also in terms of the markets, the way the markets are operating. So it doesn't surprise me at this time they aren't just looking at gas, but they are also looking at electricity, and they're also looking at other issues. And I think that is the correct thing to do, because there is no silver bullet or one solution to the problem that we face. It is a combination of many. Thank you, Andre. I probably will have to drop off in the next couple of minutes, but I would say I've really enjoyed the debate and really enjoyed listening to Eva, Andrea, Renaud, and Camille, and all the others that have spoken. So thanks for that, in case I don't get back on the floor again.
Camille, you want to intervene? There's one elephant in the room, the nuclear elephant that nobody's talking about, but go ahead, Camille.
I've already tackled the issue of nuclear, that is quite a tension between Repower EU and IEA proposal. That International Energy Agency clearly stated that both the nuclear phase out has to be delayed, and the nuclear capacity and production should be raised to increase the independence of EU. And maybe while the Repower EU will be further elaborated and discussed on May, it should be addressed as well. So I think that's really worth noticing. Secondly, I agree with James that the gas is not really the problem. I think it's a syndrome of lack of awareness in both market design and member state actions. Gas is a syndrome of complex disease that combines oil, biomass as well. Biomass import is extremely important for EU security of supply, oil and so on, coal as well. We try to tackle in our report this at the same time, those issues, and because they are interconnected, unfortunately, and that's what's make this problem so difficult to handle. So I think the problem is that we have to distinguish these two perspectives, that obviously renewables and hydrogen will be the future of replacing the Russian fossil fuels. However, in short term, we have to agree that without changing, as Eva mentioned, that natural habitat directive and birds directive simply limits the possibility to develop in such short pay. European Commission simply says that 20 billion cubic meters of gas will be replaced within this year by increased production of renewables, and that's a lot. And we have to address it if it's really realistic to say that within 1 year we'll build so much windmills. And does they really replace gas? If the wind doesn't blow, if the sun doesn't shine, where do we get the power from? And I think that's important to be aware of those problems, to put it as a complex system of different kinds of resources that cooperate with each other.
Evan, I think that that smile tells me that you may want to respond. I saw that smile told me that you may want to respond. That's it. Is that correct or not? If not, I'll go to Andrea.
No, please. I do have to disagree with gas being the symptom and not the problem. I insist on the fact that what we're seeing today is a result of a complicated situation, but with a very easy and origin. So that's the problem. I do not say that there is only one solution. We understand perfectly well that we need renewable gases for hard to abate, that we need energy efficiency, but that we need to promote renewable energy, and I'm not going to electricity, sorry. We need to promote clean electrification, non-emitting electrification. And I think that during all these years, the Commission has been putting on the table a lot of elements on what kind of electrification we could be having and the speed at which we could be getting there. I mean, in particular in the south of Europe, we have a lot of possibilities for renewable electricity. We are ready to be building gigawatts of renewable electricity, not in the coming years, next year, but we need to facilitate the permitting. We need to activate how it goes. And we need, of course, not to send the signals that the renewable and non-emitting technologies are being the problem, because they are being the solution, and the investors will be listening to that. So I think that's what we really have to take in mind.
Andrea,
and European Union solutions, please. This is coming from Spain. May I insist and insist and insist, if we are here and we have obtained the level of decarbonization that the European Union is having today, is thanks to a European Union framework. So we should not be losing, because of the circumstances, what we already got.
Andrea?
No, on the issue of the market design, having said that in this moment the problem is the price of gas and how to solve it, and we have also the issue on how to facilitate renewables. One is permitting, but the other one is also the market design. The problem is that the member states and the European Union is concentrating on the part of the market that is working more or less fine, that it's the short-term energy market, the day-ahead market. But so they are concentrating, for example, the Spanish government introducing the two-stage new market to fix prices. But actually what we are missing is a market design that is fit for rest. And a market design that is fit for rest as a focus on long-term price signals. And we saw what is the problem of not having this kind of market and not focusing on that. At the beginning of the energy crisis, the Spanish government introduced some windfall profit on producer. The first version did not contain any indication on forward market, and if you were selling the electricity in the forward market, you were obliged to pay. But when they introduced the new article excluding the electricity that you have already sold, they were not getting so much money from this windfall profit, because a market that is based on renewables need long-term price signals. And we will be in a totally different situation if our customer were allowed and our industrial customer were more willing to sign PPAs. In this moment, the current market design is fully based on day-ahead market, and we introduce the concept of state aid for renewables to have RES auctions and PPAs. It is not a question of state aid guidelines is a matter of market design. The future must be long-term, because the competition between renewable is not a competition in the market, but is a competition for the market. We need a market design that is able to put all the time in competition between different renewable projects that are able to deliver electricity at lower cost. And the only way that you can do it with renewables is through a long-term market, because in the short-term market, all the renewables are bidding at zero. And so it's not such a useful market. So it's not delivering such a great result. And the risk is what? Is that you have somebody that says, oh no, we have to tax renewable producer because they are getting OTs, extra margins because gas prices increase. No, we sold through PPAs and we sold through red auctions. And so it's totally the focus of the European Commission and member state on it's the market design of the past of 2005 when we were building CCGT. It is fantastic. Over there, the private information, the piece of the private information was the cost of gas. It was my availability to make it work. Nowadays, is the private information is how much wind and how much sunny is the situation, and how much is my cost of capital. And so I need a market design that is able to put on competition different project with a lower long-term marginal cost.
But let me look. I was in a meeting before coming here, and I was a little bit late because people were completely focused on carbon prices, and that was the worst thing in the world. All the ills were on carbon. Now all of a sudden, I mean, now that James is gone, it's gas. But so, I mean, I'd like to understand, because you cannot possibly have two different conversations. One of them is a bunch of guys totally concerned about 100 euros and CBAM and and the whole conversation. A bunch of guys kind of talking completely about energy complex and the relationship between energy commodity, and there's no discussion about carbon at all. There's something that doesn't match. I'm an electrician. That's, you know, some of you know this, some of you don't. I'm an electrician. This doesn't make too much sense to me. Renaud, I'll come back to you, because industry, energy intensive industry are kind of really saying, well, the carbon is destroying now, and gas is destroying now, electricity stuff. Which one is it? And you know, how do you reconcile all these things? At some point, there's got to be a connection between these three, but I don't hear that connection at all.
So on this point, I think that the market design modification and carbon prices are two faces of the same coin of the solution. So they are not in competition, because carbon prices apply to all the economy. Here we are saying, how can we develop renewables inside the electricity sector? But we still need carbon prices, and we need that carbon markets works perfectly, that we solve the problems that we have currently with margin calls, that we have this erratic price on CO2 prices. But we need both. We need to decarbonize also hard to abate industry. And if we want to do that, we can do only with an adequate carbon price for all the economy.
Yes, and let me add to what Andrea was saying. I think that today we are concentrated in the urgency of the gas situation in Europe. But what we do not have to forget is that all the decarbonization that we have got so far has one main pillar, and it is the ETS and the carbon pricing. And this has to reach the whole economy, because only when we feel the price signal, we need and we are incentivized to go to cleaner ways of production. And of course, it is true that the hard to abate sectors are the ones that are having bigger difficulties to do that. But technology is coming. But we do not have to forget that feeling the carbon price signal is an essential element to motivate and to incentivize the change. And then member states, of course, tackle with different ways, and the European Union is the first one, and we are the first ones that want our heavy industry to stay here and to get cleaner. But there is absolutely no way that these are two different debates. It's just a question of right now, today, because of the Ukrainian situation, we're talking more about gas, but I think carbon pricing stays as one of the main elements that we need to keep in our framework.
I think we'll start wrapping up a little bit. Renaud,
if I can,
Camille, from your side, go ahead, please. Renaud.
Yes, please. Thank you, Andre. Yes, so indeed, I didn't talk too much about carbon, but as someone just said, we are now in the emergency of the gas prices. So today now it's really the perfect storm. We have to surrender allocations. 2021 was for most of the sectors produced a lot, so they have to surrender a lot, and they have to buy, at the highest price. So those that did not anticipate, maybe they are dead. What we, as I already said in my presentation, that I focused a lot on the emergency measures, and we need those as fast as possible. Otherwise, every day we are losing market. We cannot compete when we are exporting because our competitors are not in the same situation. So, and we're losing any cash that we could have invested in order to do the transition. Then on the carbon side, really, from the industry side, we do not believe that it's just that you are going to encourage us to make the transition faster by increasing the carbon price even more. So firstly, it has to be predictable, and now what we are seeing, it's not predictable at all. So you cannot make a business model. It's the worst case scenario. Then it was dissociated from the fundamentals of the market. And then it's not performance based, and then I will come more to the ETS design, and maybe this is what the discussion that you had this morning, Andre, and CBAM. And of course we need, I cannot stress enough that in fact what our entrepreneurs are saying now is we cannot take any additional burden. It's not possible. Now in the current context, don't speak about creating additional carbon costs on the industries, because we will not survive and we will not invest. But for the design of the ETS, what we need is something which is really performance based. So we continue hammering our messages about the benchmark, and that is in the context of the current ETS review. So most of our installations are allocated under the fallback benchmark, where we are mixed together with installations that have nothing to do with our sector, that are using much more biomass, while in many of our clusters, in fact, we are not even allowed to use biomass. If you take the case of Emilia-Romagna in Italy because of the emissions, then there are huge issues of availability, but biomass is not representative for us. So biomass installations have to be excluded from the benchmark, and then you can have a more representative fallback benchmark. We should not have the increase proposed by the Commission of 2.5, but stay at 1.6. So these are things which are really, for us, vital for the future, so that we can have performance, so that the best performance can be rewarded when they are investing in decarbonization, if they are switching to electricity, if they are switching to hydrogen, so that they can be rewarded. Here, they are just being sanctioned even before they can invest.
Camille, I'll come back to you, and then we'll close if Eva and Andrea have any other comments, because I don't see any hand. Disappointing, but that's just what I have to live with. Camille?
It's always on those panels easy to say that we need more action. However, in the case of climate policy, I totally agree with Renaud. Sometimes we need less action and more evaluation. The dynamically evolving framework last 10 years and rapidly changing targets, I think, made the situation difficult for many industries. And we need to evaluate what we have done so far, like it doesn't mean changing. I'm quite sure that it's not only about the price. The business needs stability and predictability. And if we are to expect changing climate goals every 2 years, it might come really challenging for the industry. So if we want to guarantee the sovereignty of European Union in terms of energy, if we want to diversify, for security of supply, if we want to make the price as accessible as possible for industry and consumers, I think it's quite over-optimistic to say that only financial instruments will be sufficient. Like it's not only long-term contracts, I'm afraid, it's only also the way we are designing the legal framework and the pace we are putting on ourselves, that sometimes we are overdoing it a bit. That's my final point.
Well, my intention is not necessarily to criticize one or the other of these energy carriers, but more to find the relationship between these, because there have been very serious cases being made of the correlation and the impact, especially that carbon has on prices. But again, I don't want to insist. I think that people will react the way they react. There is one intervener. I have found a live intervener, Peter Bocek from CEFEC. And I promoted, Peter, you have been promoted to panelist, and I hope that you're coming in. There you go. Peter? Well, he's somewhere in the
Thank
Zoom
you,
world.
Andre. I finally found the button. Thanks. Thank you for these presentations, and also for the introduction from Pierre Schellekens, who gave us an outlook of what the Commission is doing. When I put that into contrast with what, for instance, my dear colleague Renaud told us from the ceramic industry, of course, we are in a really very difficult situation. It's short term. It is very, very shocking, the price developments that we see in the energy area. And there seems to be not too much impact on the discussion of the ETS and the CBAM files. So what we have to expect is, of course, that costs will be passed on to the EU consumer, mainly also affecting a little bit the competitiveness of our industries, also to the outside world. So the question I have is indeed, listening to Renaud, and maybe the question goes to Renaud, do you see this as a risk that we have as a result of these relatively unadapted policy streams? Is there a risk of deindustrialization as a result? Thank you.
That's do you think Renaud is going to say no to that? That's a loaded question, Peter. So anybody wants to pick up? Renaud, you want to pick up on this one, and maybe the others may want to react.
No, thank you, Peter. Good to see you. The question is, indeed, the answer is quite obvious. For us, it's, so as I said in my first slide, some of our producers have suspended their production or stopped their production, or we know of companies that were just restarting. There is a company in France, a sanitary company that has just been bought by another company and was restarting, and they stopped because at this price, it's not possible. And every day, they stop, every additional day they stop, the lower the chances that they will restart. So that's already an example of the industrialization. And clearly, it's completely crazy. It's absolutely not sustainable. If it continues like this, we will lose absolutely very fast. As I said, we are in a situation where it's what will happen in the next 3 months that will really decide whether we can continue to have an industrial basis, at least as far as we are concerned. And then maybe if you don't care about ceramics, then as I said, you need ceramics for many other products. So that will have an impact. If you want to have autonomous value chains in steel, for example, then you also need refractory materials. Thank you.
Okay, if there are thanks, Peter. If there are any last round of any comments overall responding to Peter, or anything that you always wanted to say but you didn't get to say today. I see silence. I don't see anybody wanting to raise this. Okay. Okay, well, look, go ahead.
Andre, if I may just, because of course we have mentioned many different measures, and some are more difficult to implement than others. But and as I showed in my presentation, for us, there are different solutions, but I agree that we need to decarbonize gas, and so we need decarbonized gas, but gas will remain very important for us, for example, biomethane or hydrogen. But then I said that we have, the faster is probably to electrify some of these processes. And there we really see also some conflict, maybe jumping on the intervention of Peter, between the current discussions on the ETS and the indirect ETS stated guidelines, where they can, it's quite easy to change the list, to revise the ETS stated guidelines, adapt them, and you do give an incentive to electrify. And that can be really fast. So for me, that would be, that's something that is really missing in the temporary scheme and REPowerEU.
Well, I think that we're all waiting after the presentation from Pierre Schellekens. We're also all kind of waiting for what the Commission is going to come up with their plan and the proposal. That is going to be an interesting issue. I don't see anybody on the panel wanting to make final comments. So I will then, in this case, stop here. And just, Andrea? Oh, sorry, I thought you could. One is beginning to read tea leaves, but what obviously we will do, we will continue discussion with colleagues and stakeholders and others, and waiting with great interest the package that the Commission is putting forward, and continue the conversation at that point. So stay tuned. We wish you many of you will probably be taking some vacation for the next couple of weeks. I don't know how much or who are the lucky people, but if you do, have a nice vacation. If not, we'll see you shortly on a number of other events. And some of you are surely interested in the taxonomy, and surely interested in hydrogen, and surely interested in the state of the ETS. Again, to all the panelists, thank you very much. And to the participants also, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.